Hello and welcome to another Django tutorial. Here we're going to develop a basic content management system application, practicing how to create, return, update and delete data from a database. In this project, which represents a slightly larger project than we've done so far, we'll start a new project, an application. We'll then move through models and templates and then focus on class-based views in this project, and then obviously then configure the URLs. So this is what you're going to be building, a simple content management system to manage, for example, in this case, news information. So here's all the news that's currently in the database. You can select the news and then go to the individual news page. If you go to manage posts, we can then view, edit and delete individual posts. So for example, here, if I wanted to edit this item, I could then add something different here, press edit, and then it updates. And then I can also delete. And there we go, it's disappeared. So this is a simple CRUD-based system: create, return, update, and delete. I'm working in PyCharm, so I'm going to create a new project and then select where I want to create a new project. And I'm going to call this project First Step CMS. Okay, so now I've got the project started. I'll go to the terminal. I need to make a new app. I'm going to call this app core. So manage py, start app core. So now I have my core app in place. So before we start the project, if you just create a new folder called template, if it doesn't already exist, in the main project folder, and then a folder inside of that called core. And now just add all these files. These are all the template files that you're going to need for this project. As we've just created a new application, we'll go back into the First Step CMS, into the settings. We just register this core app in the installed apps section. So next up, we're going to connect the URLs from the First Step CMS to the core URLs. So let's just add first include, and then we add a new URL pattern so we can link to the core's app. So here we're going to be utilizing a namespace so that we can easily reference the URLs on our web page. And we've included core URLs. So now we need to go to core and create a new file called core.urls.py. There we go. Okay, so I've headed over to the core URLs page. Here we're just going to build this up slightly. So we're going to need in here the import path, and we're going to need the views. So we're going to connect our URLs to views, and then we need the app name core. So because we're using a namespace in the First Step CMS URLs, in our main application URLs, we're going to connect this namespace here to these URL patterns. So first of all, we're going to need a path to the index page. So we'll just stick with that for now. So we'll just create a simple path for the index page so we can see the index page. Notice here we're using class-based views. So we use index view as view, and I'm going to call that index. So now I've headed over to the core and model. So now we're going to build a model for this system. So we're going to need a few dependencies here. We're going to need the models, the reverse. So we're going to be creating URLs. We're going to need time zone because we're going to make a timestamp in our model. And then we're going to import user from the existing table. From the admin table, we're going to import the user. So we're also going to then create a new class. So this is our new table. We're going to call this core. And then inside of here, we're going to have a title. So that's the title of the post. That's obviously going to be a char field, max length 200. And then we're going to have an excerpt, which is the main part of your post. So you can see here I'm using a text field, null equals true, which means that if you don't enter something in here, it's okay. And then we're going to have the author. So we're going to take the author from the existing named or the existing user database table that's installed when you configure your Django project. On building a Django project, there's a few different tables that are built, and we can then hook into this. So this is a foreign key that connects to the user table. And inside of that, we'll have all the users. So here we're just going to collect the users from that table, and we'll then be able to select the user. And of course, we want to connect a user to a post, so we know that who made the post. Okay, so next up we have the slug. So here we're going to make human readable slugs. So for example, if I wanted to access a single post, I would type in my URL / and then maybe the name of the post rather than using IDs. So next we want update. So this is going to be a date time field. So we're going to determine when the last update was on the post. And then we have the published date. So we can record when the post was published. Okay, so here we have the reverse. So this is a simple function that we can call to get the URL of a post. So we'll see that in action later. And then we have some meta here. So I want to order all of my posts so that the one that I've just created is at the top of the list. If I didn't have this, then when I list all the posts, the one that was created first will be at the top of the list. And I just don't want that. So I've reordered that. And then finally, we got our string representation. So we're utilizing the title so that when we return data from the database, we see the title instead of, for example, object. So it just makes it easier for us to identify the information in the database or the table. So now we have our model in place. We can now make migrations and then migrate. Now the problem we got here, before you do that, I've just remembered, in the views we've already created, in the URLs earlier, we created this pattern here. We just need to remove that before we migrate. And then we can go ahead and make migrations. So let's do that. And now we can run the migrate command. So go ahead and do that. So now the database has now been formed correctly. Now we can move on and go back into your core URLs, and we'll just replace the path we created earlier. So we've got the index, and now we concentrate on building this home page. So let's start off by creating the template. So if I go into templates and core, you should have all your files now in place. So there should be a file here called base. So we'll start from the base. So I've typed out the base. You can see that the base is simply a HTML template. Now, this is a simple HTML boiler template here. I've copied and pasted it from the Bootstrap website. So I've got all the Bootstrap CDNs. I'll quickly show you. If you head over to Bootstrap, getbootstrap.com, I've gone over to the example, the documentation, and then moved down to the starter template. So I've just copied and pasted that. So that's what you're seeing here. So if you're not familiar with the Django template system, what's going to happen is this is the base template. We're going to import this onto all of our other templates. Now, in the other templates we build, we're going to build some code, and we're going to inject that code right here within this block. So this is a template system that Django has. Here we define where we're going to add some more information. So this is block content. So in my next HTML page, I'm going to then import this base page and then put all my code or inject all my code into this place here. And obviously then it's going to show both the template and the code that's on the separate pages here. So that's the important part there. So that's our base made. So let's head over to the index page and build that. Okay, so I've made the index page, and now you'll notice that I'm extending from the base page. So I reference the folder that the templates are stored in, core, and also then the base.html. So all the base information from this file here is going to be imported onto this page. And now you'll notice that I'm referencing the rest of my code within the block content. So here are the blocks. So all my content here within this block content is going to be placed in these block contents of the base file. So here you notice that I'm using Bootstrap. So I've got an album padding top and bottom of 5, and I'm using a background light. And then I've created a container and an arrow. So this is all Bootstrap elements. So inside of here, I've got the loop. So what I'm going to do here is collect all the information from the database and loop it out. So I'm referencing it by object list, and we'll have a look at that in a second. But here's a simple loop. So we're going to loop out all the items from the database. So as we loop out the items, I want to create a new container for it all to be placed within. So here I use class from Bootstrap again to make a column of 4. And then inside of that, then I have a new element here and an image. So this is just a card from Bootstrap. So you can have a look at cards, Bootstrap cards, and how to create them. So this code here is all from Bootstrap cards. So the image that I'm making, I'm using a placeholder here, 150 by 100. So this is what you're going to see, the image that you're going to see. Now you can replace that with an image if you wanted to. And then next up, we've got then the card body. So inside the card body, I've created a heading, and then you'll notice that I'm getting the URL of the post. Now notice here that I'm calling a function that we made in the models. So here, this is the get absolute URL function here. So we're going to use reverse here. And this is going to enable us to go into the database, collect the slug that we're going to build, and utilize that to build a URL or a link to the page. So this is just a simple way of creating a link. So if I go back into index, so I call that, and that's going to build the link to make the hyperlink. And then I call the title. So I want to put the title of the post in there. I move on, and then I create a small box below that. So again, this is just all Bootstrap card system, and then I put the time. And that's something else that you could include in your model. This is hard coded in. So you could also in your model have, for example, time to read, for example. So you could add that into your model. So there we go. So that's the index page built. It's a simple loop that loops out cards onto the page that are nicely formatted that you saw in the preview. So next up, we want to get all the information from the database, and then we want to put it into this loop here to loop out all of the cards. So let's go into the views of core. Now, if you remember earlier, we created the URL for the first view. It was called index view, and this is going to be a class-based view. So inside of our views, we're going to import the model core that we created, and then we're going to be utilizing generic views here. So we're going to be utilizing ListView in this case. So ListView is basically a simple way of collecting all the information from the database, and then we can just output it onto the page. It's just a convenient way of working. So you can see here that I've created a new class called indexView. I'm going to be utilizing the ListView generic class. And then I want to tell it that to collect all the data from the model core. And then I also define the model that we're using. I could also reference the data, and we'll see that in the next view. So for example, now we have all the data from the database. So now we can then pass it over to index. And then on the index page, we then take all that data, which is now in a variable called object list. So we reference object list and we place it into core. And then for every instance in the database, this will loop round and then output the URL inside of here to make the link and then the title. So that's what we're building there. So what we can do now is we can add some data to the database, but I think what we'll do next is we'll create the single view so that we can click on the individual posts on the index, and then that takes us to the single view of the post. So here we have the single view. So let's just remember we've got all the posts on the index page displayed to the user, and then they click on an individual one, and that takes you to the single view. That's where we can see the whole post, the title, the excerpt with all the information, etc. So here we're going to create a new template called single, and then we're utilizing the detail view. So whereas here the list view, which is going to take all the information from the database, here is essentially in the detail view, we're taking one item from the database. So here we're going to select core, and then we're going to use the template name of single. And this time we're going to be utilizing a context object name. So this is, for example, here we don't define it in the index. So if I go to the index, the name then becomes object list. So everything is referenced by object list or stored in object list, and we take it out individually, we put it into core and then loop through. So here what we can do is actually name the context object name. It's post. So if I were to now copy this across to the index and just rename that as index, the context object name is this here. So I'm just going to type in index here, and that's our context object name. So this is a single view. So now we need the URL. So this is going to be utilizing the slug. So we'll see that in action in a minute, and we're then going to create the view and name that single. So now that's in place, you can now go ahead and create a super user. So go into the terminal, create a super user so that we can log into the admin. So once you've done that, we'll go over to the admin.py file in the core, and we just need to register our model. And we do that, and I've pre-populated the slug field. So when we type in the title, it's going to pre-populate the slug field. Okay, so now we can go into the admin. So turn the server on, go to the admin. You can see that I've got cores. So inside of core, I'm going to create some new posts. I've already built a post. So let's just build a new one. So new post, notice that when I type in the title, the slug is automatically being generated. So that was this piece of code here. It's pre-populating for me. And then I press save. I've missed the author. So notice that the author is admin. So the author that you made when you created a super user is going to be there. So that's what I was referring to. This is the foreign key that we built earlier. So if I go into the models, this author foreign key here, that's taking all the data from the user table that was generated automatically when you built a Django project. So when we create a super user, that's where your data or your user is being stored in the user table. So we collect all the data from there. In this case, there's only one user, and then I press save. And now I need some information here. So that already exists. So just rebuild that. And there we go. So now we have this new post in place. I've noticed I've used a number, so we'll just remove that. Just A. Let's press save. Okay, so now we've got a new post. So go back into the home page. You can now see I've got 2 posts available. Now, if I click on the individual post, you can see that this template doesn't exist. So now we need to build the single template. So I'll head over to my core template folder, press new file, single.html. Maybe you've already created yours. And inside of here, now I need to make a little template. So what I need to do here is, like the other template, first of all, I need to extend from the base. And then within the block content on the base, I want to inject this piece of code here. So this is really simple. This is a Bootstrap container and row. And then I just define here column 12 and padding top 5. And then I've got the image, just a placeholder image. And then I'm outputting the title and the post excerpt from the database. So if you remember, the post title was the title and the excerpt is the text within the post. So if I go back now and refresh, you can now see I have a single page created. Notice that it's using if you go back into the URLs, it's utilizing the slug name in the URL here. Okay, so that's now in place. So we can now move on. So what I want to do in actual fact is to have a nice little navigation bar. So let's build that first. So if I go into core, I'm going to create a new file called navbar.html. And I just want to include that navigation bar into every page so I can navigate the website. So this is a nav bar, nothing crazy. Again, it's just copied and pasted from the Bootstrap website. I'm using the Bootstrap nav bar here just for the home. And you'll notice that I'm also making a link to manage posts. So I'm just going to remove that. I've gone too far. We'll do that later. So that should now be workable. We've got this in place, a simple nav bar. You can change however you like. And so now then we need to import this nav bar onto the page. So inside of our base, we now have the include before the block element. So I'm just going to call the nav bar utilizing an include. So now when I go to my page, it says template does not exist, footer. So I've also added a footer down here. So let's just add that now. So footer.html. So we're going to build a simple footer. So you can build a footer however you like. So again, this is just a simple Bootstrap footer. I use a container, and then I'm using a simple footer with a row and so on. So I've created a simple footer and then refresh. And now we have the single page with a footer and we have a title and we've got a link back to the home. So now it's looking pretty good already. So I can click on individual posts. That takes me to the post page and so on. So now we need to think about how we're going to create the kind of admin area so that we can edit the pages. Okay, so now we're going to output everything onto the post page. This probably should have been called admin.html. You can change that if you like. So on this page, I've created a new nav bar. So this is a nav bar that's going to appear but below the existing nav bar. And on here, I'm just going to have a link to add in a new post. So we're going to create this URL shortly. We'll remove it for now. Okay, so next up, we have the loop to output all the posts. So this is going to output all the posts. And as I output the posts, I'm going to add a link next to them where I can edit or delete. So those are going to be the links then to the individual add and delete pages. So I'll remove those for now, otherwise it won't work. So we've then got that. Okay, so we now have this simple framework. So we should now be able to navigate to this page once we add the URL to it. So let's add a URL to this post page. So here we need to remember that the URLs work from top to bottom. They're read from top to bottom. So if we were to run this URL, it wouldn't work because this path would be initiated. So we need to place this URL above the slugs so that this gets found first. So if we were to type in post /, this slug would be looking for the word post / it would be actually looking for post called post. So now we have that in place, we can then go over to our view and create a new view. So this new view called post view is pretty much exactly the same as our index view. We're going to be utilizing the list view to extract everything from the database. We tell it the model we want the data from, and then the template and the post object, sorry, the context object name. So we go back into posts, we're using the context name here, we're looping out everything. We're going to loop out the title, and that's about it. And so now we've got the URL in place, the view in place. So let's go over to the web page and select manage posts. And now we have everything in place here. So we're now looking at the administration area where we can only at the moment view the data. So in a short while, we're going to use an edit button and a delete button so that we can delete and edit posts. So this is the sub menu that I created in the post here. So the sub navigation bar you're looking at. So that's that in place. And we should now be able to add new, and it will then take us to a page where we can add some more data. So let's now sort that out so that we can add new data to the system. So let's just start off with the URLs. So we're going to add a new URL. It needs to be above the slug. Again, otherwise this will be captured by this path here. So we add a new path, add, and then this is going to be called add view. So we then go over to views and then build a new view. Okay, so this is the add view. We're going to use the create view, the built-in view create view. That's going to handle a lot of things for us. So we'll select the model, the fields, the template name. So notice here that you can individually select views. So in the add view area, this is where we're going to have a form. Someone's going to type in some information into that form and obviously make a new post. So we need to identify the fields we want in that view. So we can either do that by individually naming the fields, or we can just use the all. So we're going to take out all the fields from the database and then put that into a form so we can add all the elements. So we've got the template, we've got the fields, and then we have a success URL. So here basically once we've submitted the form, we want to take the user somewhere. So here we're going to take them to posts. So we're going to utilize this tool here called reverse lazy. So we're going to need to import that in at the top here. So this is going to enable us to utilize this success URL feature to send us off to core posts. Notice that I'm referencing core first and then the name of the URL. So this is a function that we set up originally. So if you remember, we created a namespace called core, and then in core URLs, we had an app name. So here I'm referencing it by app name and then the URL. Okay, so now we have this in place. We now need to think about our form that we're going to build. So let's build our form. So let's go into the core and create a new file. We're going to call this forms.py, and then just create a basic form here. So import in forms and then the core, obviously that's the model. And then what we're doing here is we're creating a class called post form. Okay, so this is going to be the form that we're going to create automatically. And we add some meta to it. So we tell it what model to use, and then the fields that we're going to use, just all. So again, that's just going to create a simple form from the model. It's going to take all the fields from the model and then create a form based upon. Now, to help us manage the forms, actually build the forms and format them, we're going to utilize a module here called Django widget-tweaks. So I type in pip Django widget-tweaks, and then I just install that. Okay, so now we can head over to the add.html and have a look at this. So you can see here again, like every page, we extend from the base, and then this time we load widgets. So widget tweaks. So that's the module we just installed. Now what we also need to do is go over to settings of our main projects, and we just need to install that and make it available within our projects by typing in widget tweaks. So I'm not going to go over in any detail of what widget tweaks are, but it's going to provide an easier method to create forms. So let's just have a look at this form. We're creating again a Bootstrap container and then a form. So we start off with a bit of security and then we loop through. So this loop here, this is basically looping through the database, collecting all the fields and then creating a label for each and an input form if needed. We then finish that off with a form group down here with the button, and then underneath that we have the cancel button. That's going to take us back to the core posts. So that's the general overview. There, not too much detail, apologies, but that's going to create our form. So we should have a form now that's being collected, all the data is being collected from a database, it's automatically generating a form, and now it's been nicely presented through widget tweaks on our page. So let's go over to the server, just make sure the server's turned on, and then just see if this works. So now I should be able to press add new. Okay, so I need to set up this button now. So let's just go back into this. We need the post templates, and now inside of here, and we need to make a link now to the add new. So URL core, the app name, remember, and then the URL add by name. So let's try that, refresh, and then add. And there we go. So now we have our new add page. Everything's nicely placed together. So let's just test this out. Author, admin, slug. We need to build this automatically, the slug. Oh, sorry, manually. And then I need to change the name there, edit, to submit. And there we go. We now have a new post. So now we've got the functionality where we have a home page. We've got all the items. We've got a single page to show the individual posts. We can then manage posts. At the moment, we can view and add new. So now we need to edit. So now we're going to add a new button here, edit, so that we can now edit the posts. So editing the post, what we need to know is what post we're editing. So we're going to work out what post based upon the primary key of the post. Now, if I go back into my models, the primary key is the ID of this table. Now, this automatically gets placed in here when we create the model. So, for example, every time we create a post, that post is given an ID, a primary key ID, a unique number, and we can now use that number to reference that post in the database, in the table, to collect that individual post. So we're going to be utilizing that right here. So PK, we're referencing it as PK, primary key. So here we can put this anywhere. So edit and primary key. And now we're going to create a new class called edit view. So here we are. This is the edit view. So here we're utilizing the generic view update view. So this is going to handle everything for us. All we need to tell it is the model name, the template as per normal, what fields we want to edit. And now we need the PK URL KWARG. So this is PK. So here, if you remember in the URLs, we're referencing this PK as primary key. So we want that number to be passed over to our view. So we're referencing it as PK. And then we got the success URL, which is going to be taking us back to posts. So that's the edit. Everything's going to be nicely automated for us because we created the form. We've got the form plugin and to make it look nice. So let's go over to the edit page. So edit.html. So the edit page is basically made up of the extension to the core, loading the widgets again so we can present the information, and then the content block. So inside the content block, if I just zoom out so you can see all the code, in the content block, we've got a form and we've got the security again, and then the loop. So we're going to loop out all the input fields that we need. And then down here, we've got the button. So we've got a new form group. So remember, the form group is a Bootstrap area for an element in a form. So we output that. And of course, all the data that's relevant to that primary key post is going to be inserted inside of the form. So this is called edit. So what we need to do now is go over to the posts.html page. And then down here, we want to add a new button. So we've got a button for view. So now we want to add a button for edit. So we place it just underneath there. So I'm going to add two buttons here. One for the edit and one for delete. So notice that what we're doing is setting up the URL in the link. And then I've got an edit and a delete button. Okay, so let's just remove that for now before we do the delete. Okay, so now I've got that in place. If I refresh the page, I've now got a button here for edit and delete. So this is the post page. If I click on delete, that takes me to the edit page for that particular post. So that was a ZZZ. This is a new post A. If I edit that, it takes me to the new post A and I can edit that. Just change that name, press edit, and now you can see that it's changed. So I've now got an editing function. So the last thing I'm going to need is the delete. So let's go back, put that back. So we're now going to create a new URL for the delete. So like editing, where we use the primary key to identify the individual post in the database, we're going to then use it again, in this case for delete, and create a new class called delete in our view. So now we head over to the view and create a new class delete. So here we can utilize the delete view, the built-in generic class here. So here's our new view. So you can see that we're utilizing the delete view. Model core, then we use the PK again. And then the success URL, the reverse lazy, so it takes us back to the post. And then we've got the template name, which is going to be called confirm delete. So let's just open up the confirm delete. So you can see this is just a extension again from the core, the block content. Inside of that, we've got a simple container and then a form with a simple submit. Okay, so now we've got that in place. Let's head over to the delete. So refresh, click on delete, takes me to the page. It says, are you sure you want to delete ZZZZ? This is obviously ID number 3. So that's how it's referencing this particular post. I press confirm and now it's gone. So I've just deleted 2 more. So now we have add new, we have view, we have an edit functionality, and we have a delete functionality. So hopefully now you have developed a basic content management system application where you can now create, return, update, and delete. So there's lots to take from this project. For example, the class-based views, utilizing the widgets. Definitely have a look and read into how to utilize that more effectively. But you saw also the ease in which you can build a CRUD system utilizing the built-in generic classes that are available in Django. Overall, I hope you've enjoyed this project. I hope your project is working and now you're thinking about how you can add an admin system to this so that you can protect the creation, the updating and the deletion of posts. Well, if you've got this far, thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next tutorial.